off their back, need to do so to get them to be obedient to you in their all rights that you did not have the right, because you were not the orchestrator of life. It belonged to the one that gave life, and that was God himself. And so I wanted to share again a little bit and read a little bit regarding the movement of Black history, since we're still in February. If y'all will let me do that. Now, if you are spiritually hungry tonight, we'll be able to get some scriptures too to kind of talk you through some of the instances of how God dealt with them in the first instance of slavery and as to how it actually transpired biblically. But we have to be thankful to the Lord that things are as they are, even with us in this day and this time. For those that did not, I know we went to, I think it was the Carolinas, and we had a tour guide. And of course, he was can I just be blunt, he was a white guy, very wise man that kind of educated us as to how slavery entered into the Americas. And like I said, I was so blown away with a lot of the things that we learned that, I think it's a good thing for all of us as a people to learn the whole movement of that slave movement and that movement of taking us on to engrave the history that we read about. And so I'm going to start with this that I just kind of penned as I watched and kind of just penned some of the things that I was looking at. It says slavery in America. How did it start? And when did it start? And how did it actually penetrate the fibers of America? We heard a little bit of the snippets of it from Sister wasn't Sister Velvet, it was Sister Bethany in the 1800s. But in 1619, in Virginia, there were different ports of parts that where the slaves were brought to. And so it says this was an isolated colony there on the Chesapeake Bay. And so there was a group of Englishmen or Europeans that had come to the Americas. Do know that the natives were already in America. So when people tell you the history of Columbus and all that, discovering something that, so we're not going to fight about that, okay? So understand that. So it says they were trying to make this particular area prosperous for England or the Europeans after getting to the Americas. Said that the colony was struggling and devastated by hunger and disease and basic needs. They were also raided by the natives or Native Americans that existed before they came there. So when a ship by the name of the White Lion, a Dutch ship, badly damaged because of the long voyage that it had made to the Americas, it landed in the port of Virginia, and it was carrying about 20 kidnapped Africans. 20 kidnapped Africans that were in bad health due to the journey that they had made. The colony took them in as human cargo and began to nourish them back to health, giving them food, clothing them, and helping them to kind of be able to regain their stamina and their strength, giving them the essentials that they needed. And so, as I said, with shelter and etc. Now, at this particular time, the colony didn't have a blueprint or a model for slavery. So slavery didn't exist at that time. There's just 16 Africans that had come in there and they took care of them. So once the Africans had gotten healthy, they joined the poor whites. And please don't y'all take this the wrong way with me. We just talking history of back history. So they joined the poor whites because they didn't have nothing and the Africans didn't have nothing. But one thing that those Africans had was they had the ability to do things that the whites didn't have. They knew how to plant and raise crops. And they began to show them how to do things. And it was amazing for what these settlers were learning, looking at these 16 black Africans that was going to begin to repopulate this area. It says, at this particular time, because there was no model for slavery, and they began to look at how they began to prosper with looking at the labor that they were benefiting from, these particular slaves or Africans. It says they came up with a plan. And the plan was not to make you slaves, but to make you indentured servants. Indentured servants, which meant there's a biblical principle, and we're going to read about where they try to get a lot of the principles from the Bible with the 7-year Jubilee, 50-year Jubilee, and then the 7-year Release Act. So this is what they said. You come in, you're going to work hard, and you're going to earn food, and we're going to work with you, and you're going to earn your right to land and food. After 7 years, you will be free. You will be free. It's what they said. That was the agreement. Do you think the agreement was kept? Watch. This is just a little somber part of history. It says, after all of the hard labor and the 7 years, the colonies prospered and exports grew more and more profitable. And when the 7-year period ended, the colonies were reluctant to release their labor. They didn't want to release them. Now, unlike the counterparts that they ran into who held citizenship, they said, in their home country, so the Africans were not subject to English common law. They were workers without rights. You see what's happening now. They're slowly being made slaves. And they have brought them in from their common ground. So in 1641, slavery was recognized and legalized, which meant now that Africans became chattel or personal property that could be owned for life. It says slave labor enabled the colonies to become so prosperous that in 1660, old King Charles II got involved. And this is what he said. He established what they called the Royal African Company to transport humans they called black gold from Africa to America. So what happened there is they found out where these Africans came from, and then he established this transport company, and then you would see that they would load up the boats, and it showed all the pictures, how they would stack them in these boats. And they were coming against their will. They were being made to come. Families were torn up. It didn't matter. Now the kings, you may wonder why, just to think, the African kings, for an exchange for what they got and they gave them, they would let them have these African children, men and women, and load them up on boats, and they would make that long voyage back from Africa and back to the Americas. And so this transport system was in gear, and that's where you started to see the bring of the onslaught of the Africans coming in. And I know it's a lot more to go to that because they had tried to use the Indians, but it didn't work. But when they found out what these Africans could do and withstand the sun and knew how to plant, and they now was prospering, they didn't want to let them go. So now they were bringing them from Africa, and they was calling them black gold. So they was bringing them in here, bringing them in and bringing them in. Now what started to happen is there were chains set up. And listen to what happened. It says they were bringing them in as black gold. But now, after a while, England outlawed the movement of slaves in 1807. But by that time, America relied on its own slave trade. It says by 1860, 1 million slaves were being sold and moved into the colonies. Families being torn apart. Said traders marched their slaves from the East Coast all the way to the southern plantation. Along the way, slaves were herded like animals and crowded in pens and put in warehouses. And traders wanted what they called a self-reproduced labor force. So now, and the labor that was used basically turned into slavery. So they had a cycle of slavery. So they would, have their children to be reproduced by parent, and then they got a cycle. They just got labor. And so the more labor they got, the better off they were to be able to actually have more slaves. It says bucks and breeding wenches were sold at auctions, along with prime hands to work the fields. These were the young men. And what they call fancy girls, graceful, light-skinned women who were sold into prostitution or to be the mistress for the masters. Sad situation. But there was from the Africas to Americas, and now no rights because you didn't have any. And so this is the startup of everything. It says the enslaved populations were controlled by legally authorized violence, whippings in public, floggings. Owners were fined if they didn't punish recaptured runaway slaves. But slaves had always had its critics in America. As the slaves slow grew, so did the opposition, and eventually America became a divided country because of slavery. And y'all remember what that war was. North against the South. And it was all because of slavery, Confederacy. And so when you think about it, the whole evil mentality of it was simply a selfish thought of gain to create revenue and money and the use of a people that we call the Africans that turned into slavery. And so that's a little capture of it. I know a lot more happened. It was a lot more involvement that happened there. But this guy relayed the story so good that he painted a good picture showing how that basically the Americas were built on the backs of us as people. And unfortunately, we didn't get the credit. We figured out how to make things, and he showed a lot of the tools that were made, a lot of the things that were used to create easier way to perform and do labor that were taken out of our hands and put in the stores. Anybody know what a hoe is? Right? And they figured that out. Yes, sir. You finna say something? Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah, right. Oh, I mean, listen, this stuff was made. Who was doing the work? We had to figure a way out how to do it. And believe it or not, you would be surprised when you look at all the inventions that were made sitting in the yard or under the tree with lack of nothing to eat, trying to figure an easier way to do it. And that's what brought about a lot of the tools that we now use with the comforts of our own houses now and around our homes. So biblically, what did it say or stand to us? And I talked about it a little bit. So again, I just wanted to share that little bit with you. And I know it's a very uncomfortable subject for some of us. We just don't want to hear about it because, but I think it's good to know or have some knowledge of our beginnings as to how things happen or transpired. One of the things that makes you be more appreciative is the fact that I know that a lot of the young people don't understand the realities of what it means to have the opportunity to vote, and they don't care. They could care less. But when you learn what we had to go through to get that right, it makes you actually have more of a go gear to go out and vote because we didn't have any rights. Any rights. And so how did they use the Bible in that day, and where did it come about, and how did they use it to be able to accomplish the taskings that they were able to do it? So here's a little bit on that. Slave Bibles from the 1800s, again, we just talked about it in the 1800s, omitted key passages that could incite rebellion. Now I'm going to tell y'all this, and as we talk about this, because it's just tonight, but listen, I don't want you to get misconstrued and start to thinking, well, what about, why? And then you start thinking, and you can get into this thing and like, well, why? And so, the enemy is smart. Now, I don't want you to sit there and get carried away and get up and go out and hit nobody on the way home or beat nobody up, or how you look at somebody side-eyed and all, like a dad, as Mother Marsha say, because it could do you like that, and you sit down and go to thinking about some of the things, but it can mess you up. Now, I'm just being real, but we have to learn how to continue to be humble and love, because in spite of what we went through. All right, so somebody said, well, you saying all that on? Yeah, I'm just saying the truth. It's the truth. All right, so it says this now, and I know too that a lot of times you have to recognize too that a lot of the current day, people didn't have anything to do with what happened way back then, So I know that too, I share office with my friend. He didn't have anything to do with that, But it was a lot of stuff that was carried over, trained and taught and inbred in people, and it was wrong. All right. It was wrong. All right. So it says on display now in the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. is a special exhibit centered on the rare Bible from the 1800s that was used by the British missionaries to convert and educate slaves. What's notable about this Bible is not just its rarity, but its content, or rather, the lack of content. It excludes any portion of text that might inspire rebellion or liberation. They want you to read nothing that would give you a mind or a thought to cause you to rebel or see liberty or hope in liberty. And so a lot of things were removed. And it says that Anthony Smith, Associate Curator of the Bible and Religion in America at the museum, says it's the first instance of this abridged version titled Parts of the Bible Selected for the Use of Negro Slaves in the British West Indian Islands, and was published in 1807. In 1807. So these are very factual things that actually occurred with the usage and the controls of biblical principles to maintain control over the Africans or the black people. Listen to this. About 90% of the Old Testament is missing. 90% of the Old Testament is missing. And 50% of the New Testament is missing. So what they did was went through the Bible and took out what they feel like might incite rebellion or cause you to feel a spirit of liberation. Now, I know everybody know about Harriet. Harriet's sitting here with us tonight. And I know a lot of the other the black American people. There was some helps that they got along the way from other people that were white that did not go along with slavery. If that helps somebody. All right. It says, put another way, there were 1,189 chapters in the Standard Protestant Bible. This Bible contains only 232. The Bible that they had for the black slaves. Smith says that could have prompted rebellion for this example. Here's a scripture that was used. There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither bond nor free. There is neither male nor female. So he said, for ye all are one in Christ. Galatians 3:28. We couldn't read that. So that was took out. So he says, in verses that reinforce the institution of slavery, including the most famous pro-slavery verse that many pro-slavery people would have cited, is this: servants, be obedient to them that are your own masters, according to the flesh, with fear and trembling, and singleness of your heart, as unto Christ. Ephesians 6:5. Those are scriptures that they will use to control us. It's really funny how the devil can use anything he wants to use to get his program across. But it's amazing, too, how that all in the name of dirtiness and money and the love of it to control the people, to get ahead with gain and selfishness, this was done to control people. It says it was intended to be used among enslaved Africans in the British West Indies, which is the modern-day Caribbeans. So Jamaica, Barbados, Antigua, he says. He says that several theories behind the editing and omitting of, he says, so much of the Standard Bible, but the main thought stems from the fact that farmers in the West Indies were opposed to missionaries who said worked with the enslaved Africans on their land. They didn't want them because they didn't want them to tell or teach or talk to them about the reality of what was going on. It says this could be seen as an attempt to appease the planter class, saying, look, we're coming here. We want to help uplift materially these Africans here, but we're not going to be teaching anything that could incite rebellion. So Smith says, coming in and being able to educate African slaves would prepare them one day for freedom, but at the same time would not cause them to seek it more aggressively. So it kept them kind of controlled. All right. He went on to say that in this museum, it says that they decided to create this exhibit, the Slave Bible. It says because of the attention of visitors were already giving it the artifact. From the very beginning, people have been shocked to see it, Smith says. It's drawn a lot of interest. In fact, of all the items we have on display, here it's probably been the most talked about among the guests. And that's that Bible that we're talking about. Did y'all know that Bible existed? I didn't. I had no idea about no slave Bible. You know, I didn't. And I don't even believe that guy brought up no slave Bible. I know he talked about preachers that they would hire to bring in and they would tell them what scriptures to preach to the slaves, and they would make them, and they would make them, get them excited, and then they would preach, and that was to control them, to make sure that they didn't have them. It's just terrible, to say the least. All right, it says one of the points of the exhibit is that time and place really shaped how people encounter the Bible. Smith says, what I mean by that is people don't look at the Bible or approach the Bible and read the Bible in a vacuum. They're shaped by their social and economic context. He says, as people that come from a multitude of backgrounds, he says, how they encounter the Bible can very greatly vary from person to person based on how people see the Bible. It says the exhibit will affect them differently. So everybody that go through is affected in some way differently than maybe the other person. Some people it may not bother, and some people it just tear you up. Sometimes hearing stuff like this may not bother you. Some people just sit there and get mad. Get mad, as they say. I'm just mad. And it can mess you up. Like I said, you don't want to walk around and look at nobody funny. You want to still try to love people, right? Said, I hope people take away a greater appreciation for that, and maybe even self-reflection, to be more cognizant, he says, of why you're reading something in a certain way. If people can better appreciate that, then maybe they can better empathize with others. And so we know now that Scripture was utilized. It says this Bible is to control us. The Bible is on loan from Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee. It says, and has been in the museum since it opened. So that Bible landed in Fisk University some kind of way. Anybody know what Fisk is in Nashville? And it says, since it opened in November of 2017, they let them have that Bible, I guess, to use it. So the university says only 3 copies of this Bible are known to exist, and that one is on display in Washington, is the copy in the U.S. or United States. Isn't that interesting? Very interesting. All right, so other scriptures that were used or utilized even as we read today, Colossians 4:1, Masters, give unto your service that which is just and equal, knowing that ye also have a master in heaven. And we'll talk about this in just a minute. We just read Galatians 3:28. 1 Peter 2:18. Servants, be subject to your masters with all fear, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the froward. So when you read scriptures like this and you begin to take connotation, our minds immediately go to the physical or the fleshly aspect of it. But there's a spiritual hierarchy of how Scripture was generated, because God had a higher purpose for everything that he did with us as a believing people. So the first incident of slavery took place, and we all know it to be that when the Egyptians took, and with very, very harsh treatment, how they did the people of God. But God had a plan. God had a plan. And so when you read, a lot of times you're reading the history, we don't realize that God did have a plan. Now, one thing, I'll read this, and I know, and I'm not going to sit here all night just talk, because there's so much here. One thing about this, in Deuteronomy chapter number 15, Sister Barbara, if you'll go there. Do you have a microphone with you? All right, go to Deuteronomy chapter number 15. They didn't treat, the Israelites, when they came out of slavery, God had a plan. And he did address the rights of how they needed to be treated, even as slaves or bondwomen or bondmen. And so they did, and this is something that didn't happen. Now look at this, at how this treatment that he's going to give them. And they didn't leave empty either. In 15 and 12 of Deuteronomy. And he did address it, because they were slaves.
And if thy brother
And I'll tell you what, let's do, Sister Barbara. Start with verse number 7. And he's just talking about the poor man. Start with verse number 7. Listen to this, y'all.
If there be among you,
There be among you,
a poor man of one of thy brethren, within any of thy gates, in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not harden thy heart.
Don't harden your heart.
Nor shut thine hand from thy poor brother. But if thou shalt open thine hand wide unto him, and shalt surely lend him sufficient for his need,
yes,
in that which he wanted.
And that,
beware that there be not a thought in thine weakened heart, saying, the 7th year, the year of release.
The year of what?
Release.
The year. You notice that 7 years a lot of times used for a lot of things, right? So in that connection, a lot of this come from old biblical principles that they would use, like, your credit, every 7 years, I believe it is. And then like even this as the year of release, every 7 years. Now this didn't happen, but that principle that I told you about when I first started reading, the indentured service was going to work how many years? And then they were supposed to get released, right? This is where it come from. And so they were going to release them, and they were going to give them land and let them have their own, but it didn't happen. And somebody got greedy in their selfish will. But look at what he's saying for them to do. Read.
Okay. The year of release is at hand.
The year of release is at hand.
And thy eye be evil against thy poor brother.
What? And thy eye be evil against thy poor brother. And that's what it was. Their eyes were evil against their poor brother.
And thou givest him not.
And thou givest him not.
And he cry unto the Lord against thee.
And he gonna cry unto the Lord against thee.
And it be sin unto thee. Thou shalt surely give him. And thine heart shall not be grieved when thou givest unto him. Because that for this thing the Lord thy God shall bless thee.
Now, y'all, if this type of spirit existed when we first came to the, listen, everybody could have been blessed. It was enough here for everybody to live and thrive on. But for the evil and the greed, I'm going to subject you to harsh punishment to make you do and sell you, take you out of your element, and just, it was just sad. Amen. Read.
In all thy works.
In all thy works.
And in all that thou puttest thine hand to do.
And God was going to bless you if in all that you put this hand. This is a principle to the children of Israel or to the Israelites. All right. Read.
For the poor shall never cease.
For the poor shall never cease.
Out of the land.
Out of the land.
Therefore, I command thee, saying.
I say, I command thee, saying.
Thou shalt open thine hand.
Thou shalt do what?
Open thine hand.
They should have opened their hand.
Wide unto thy brother.
Wide to thy brother.
To thy poor.
To thy poor.
And to thy needy.
And to thy needy.
In thy land.
In thy land. Now, if that principle would have took place, just think about that's what they should have done. But nope, it was just the opposite. Now look at this. And this principle that he's teaching them to do in slavery. Read.
And if thy brother.
An Hebrew man.
Or an Hebrew woman. Be sold unto thee. And serve these 6 years. Then in the 7th year.
Then in the what year?
7th year.
In the 7th year.
Thou shalt let him go free from thee.
Now you should keep him.
Thou shalt let him go free from thee.
You should do what?
Let him go free from thee.
Let him go free from thee. It was evil. And and the Lord generally dealt with the practice of his people as a painting. And if they had read these things, then they would have known how to entreat people, period. But this didn't happen, and this is not. And they certainly didn't do this, because I'm talking about what they were saying, an acre and what is it, a mule and 40 acres or something like that, Didn't happen, guys. Didn't happen. And I read somewhere where I think they had met and was going to do something like that. But But all of a sudden, no, we ain't giving them nothing. Uh-huh.
And when thou sendest him out free from thee.
Wait a minute. And when thou do what?
Sendest him out free from thee.
When I send you out free from thee, after that 6 years, you don't wear 7th year. When I send you away, what's going to happen?
Thou shalt not let him go away empty.
What? Should let me go away what?
Thou shalt not let him go away empty.
Don't let him go away empty. This is the courtesies of what we have blessed you with. It should have been that after we done what we said we were going to do. Here, I've been blessed. Let me bestow upon you. Let me give to you. Let me do for you. But no, that spirit was not there. It got worse and worse because people began to capitalize on the act of slavery. Read.
Thou should furnish him liberally.
Furnish him how?
Liberally.
Liberally. Freely. What?
Out of thy flocks.
Out of thy flocks.
And out of thy floor.
And out of thy floor.
And out of thy wine press.
And out of thy wine press.
Of that wherewith.
And that wherewith.
The Lord thy God.
The Lord thy God.
Hath blessed thee.
Has done what?
Blessed thee.
Blessed thee.
Thou shalt give unto him.
Now, that's what really should have happened. And that's what really, that general principle, if they had stood by it all the way, they just took the 7 years, but they didn't stand by the full principle. And you know how people will go through the Bible and they'll pick out what they want to pick out and let that be applicable in their situation. The other stuff, they leave it alone. Don't read that. Don't read that. Skip around. Leave that. But I only want to read what's going to benefit me. And all, you know how people want to smoke up and drink up everything. God made this plant. And it's good because everything he said he made was good. They right, Brother Carter? You know how people use all kinds of scriptures, don't they? Yeah, man, he said it's good, that corn plant, to make that corn whiskey. We can drink a little shot. Yeah, there you go. Oh, Lord. There's so many more scriptures. That's good, evangelist. But even in the first chapter of Exodus, you know, the whole premise of that move came because it says, come, verse number 10 of Exodus, and it says, come and let us deal what? Wisely with them, lest they multiply and come to pass that, he says, when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us. So get them up out of the land. Therefore they did set them taskmasters. First sign and movement of slavery was to the people of God. And he still got Brick going, ain't you? Yeah, that's right. All right. But we'll go through do y'all want to go through a little bit more of the Bible next time, just to see the whole movement into the New Testament with regard to how they generated God. You see, listen, don't ever feel like that God subbed the people. He didn't. He never did. And it never was condoned that we should be treated less than what we were, and that was a child of God. Never. Evil men, they did that. God didn't do that. And I'm going to tell you something, saints, whether people believe it or not, people are going to get punished for a lot of stuff they done. And they don't see it, and they don't believe it. But even men stealers, you know, just get that and we'll quit. Let's go to, I think it's First Timothy 1 and verse 9 or verse 10, I believe it is. You can start with verse 9 and then read through, because it'll get it in there. It's going to tell you about something that's going to happen and who God going to get, because he's going to get everybody. They're going to get it. But it's a lot through in the Bible regarding this. Start with verse number 9. 1 Timothy 1 and verse 9. And let's see if God going to get these men stealers in there. Read, Evangelist.
1 Timothy 1 and 9.
Yeah, start with verse 9.
Knowing this, that the law is not made for a righteous man.
The law is not made for a righteous man.
But for the lawless.
But for who?
The lawless.
The lawless.
And disobedient.
And disobedient.
For the ungodly.
For the ungodly.
And for sinners.
And for sinners.
For unholy.
For unholy.
And profane.
And profane.
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 For murderers of fathers.
For murderers of fathers.
And murderers of mothers.
And murderers of mothers. Now this is what the law is made for.
For manslayers.
Manslayers.
For whoremongers.
For whoremongers.
For them that defile themselves with mankind.
Them that defile themselves with mankind.
For men stealers.
Wait a minute. For what?
Men stealers.
Men stealers. You know what a lot of people did? When they went to the Africas, they stole people. And they took them against their will. And brought them to a place. And made them labor under harsh conditions and situations in a foreign land. And took our rights. Men stealers gonna get in trouble. Read.
For liars.
For liars.
For perjured persons.
Perjured persons.
And if there be any other thing.
If there be any other thing.
That is contrary to sound doctrine.
That is contrary to sound doctrine.
According to the glorious gospel.
According to the glorious gospel.
Of the blessed God.
Of the blessed God.
Which was committed to my trust.
Listen, y'all. Don't worry. You don't have to worry. And I know a lot of times people say, well, it can't come too soon. You know, but God is a just God. And I say to each of us, as we read from Romans, you know, our job now is to become the slave of God, you know, serving him, worshiping him, giving him glory, and giving him praise. All right, let's get our traveling fun. And Sister Gibson, do we have any announcements? All right. Thank you. All right. So Spencer, you need some help, Spencer, or can you get it? You got it? Okay. All right. All right. Well, saints, we thank God for you. Now, there is a funeral, and it is this Saturday, and it's at Straightway Apostolic Church at 1:00 p.m. And for those of you that did not know Willie Howard Love, that was the uncle of Sister Sandra, and who else in here? He's brother Spencer and Sister Mildred and them. That was he passed. I think it was last week, and so there will be no visitation. So there will be no visitation, and there will be no viewing on Sunday. It will simply be a funeral at 1:00 at the Straightway Apostolic Church, and then there will be a feeding afterwards in the gymnasium after the funeral. And I think that's the way I was explained to, you know, that's the way it would happen. So there won't be any viewing at all, and there won't be any wake, or as we call it, the day before. It just be the funeral on Saturday, and it's just to be the acknowledging of the body that's in the casket with no viewing. So there's no need to go in it earlier than what you would unless you're just trying to get a seat, because there won't be any viewing of the body. All right, and that's the order of the day for that. And please, all right. I was just trying to make sure that everybody knew. So if you have any other questions, that's all I know. All right. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.